I also wish to address the issue of upward-only rent reviews. Obviously, both Fine Gael and Labour in their pre-election manifestos promised to tackle this issue, but were unable to proceed with the envisaged bill on constitutional advice of the Attorney-General. Contrary to what the Fianna Fáil spokesperson said, Mr Justice Charlton's decision of yesterday, which I have here and I would propose that he read a copy of it, doesn't interfere with the general principle, or doesn't question the general principle that banning upward-only rent reviews retrospectively by the government would be unlawful. It deals with a very specific contract, and Mr Justice Charlton makes that very clear. Nevertheless, the difficulty of upward-only rent reviews prevails. I mean, one only has to, and I think everybody here in this chamber has been canvassing throughout Meath East. You only have to walk down any high street in Ireland, be it Kilrush, Ennis or Meath East. You'll see a lot of shops closing. Mr Justice Charlton specifically deals with the fact that he's not in a position to put himself in the place of the parties and negotiate a better deal for one party, even if that's what they should have negotiated at the time, even if that leads to liquidation. And that's the difficulty, because you have businesses which are being liquidated on the basis that they can't pay their upward-only rents. But after they've been liquidated, somebody else comes into that business and, as Mr Justice Charlton pointed out, pays perhaps 50% less. And the person beside them, who's in the same place as perhaps the company which has been liquidated, then has to compete with somebody who is paying 50% less. So the problem does prevail, and I would urge the Minister for Justice to consider a constitutional referendum on this issue. If we can have a referendum to reduce the pay of judges, or we can have a referendum to abolish the upper house in the Oireachtas, then I don't see why we can't have a referendum to clarify that we can abolish upward-only rent reviews, even when they have been agreed before that referendum. Thank you. I look forward to the Minister's response.
On the need for constitutional change concerning upward-only rent review clauses in commercial leases, the constitutional issue arises because of the protection afforded by the Constitution to private property. In this regard, rent from commercial premises is a property right for the purposes of the Constitution. Article 40 of the Constitution provides that the state will vindicate the property rights of every citizen. It is necessary to bear in mind that the right to private property is an important protection signed in the Constitution for the benefit of all citizens. The state guarantees not to enact laws to abolish these rights. That guarantee is tempered, however, by Article 43, which provides that the right to private property ought to be regulated by the principles of social justice. Essentially, the Oireachtas may pass laws limiting the right to private property in the interests of the common good. However, where such a law is enacted, the advice is that compensation for the restriction of property rights may be required. In that context, there are also issues of compatibility with the European Convention on Human Rights. The suggestion is the Constitution be amended so that the rent from commercial property should no longer be regarded as a right to be protected under the Constitution. An obvious question flows from that line of thought. That is, where does the picking apart of rights enshrined under the Constitution stop?
1 minute.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your reply, although I don't think it added a lot to what we previously knew. We were aware that there were constitutional difficulties with this, but in your reply, Minister, you said that you were afraid of the picking apart of rights enshrined under the Constitution, and where would this stop? Well, we've already re-examined the contours of rights in the Constitution. I mean, the right to liberty was re-examined when there was a constitutional referendum on bail. The right to citizenship of every child born in this state was re-examined when it was narrowed to every child born in the state to parents who were legally resident here. I mean, I'm not proposing, and I don't think at this stage in 2013 in the Labour Party, we're not talking about the abolition of private property. I don't think even Deputy Stanley or Deputy Murphy would like to abolish private property at this stage. But what we're merely saying is that the right to private property be narrowed. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it, Deputy. Glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Not so glad to hear you compare yourself to Deputy Ahern, but that's enough for yourself. But, Minister, what we're talking about is a narrow changing of the contours of the right to private property such that upward-only rent reviews would be deemed contrary to public policy and therefore unenforceable by the courts.
Thank you.
The retail sector, Minister, has the potential to provide 15,000 jobs. That's what we, the Labour Party, proposed, or that was our assessment of it in advance of the last election, and that hasn't changed, Minister. This is still an issue which needs to be addressed, even if it requires a referendum.